The clock is ticking for Pakistan. The nation faces a severe economic crisis. Reserves dwindle, barely enough to cover a few weeks of imports. Inflation soars, eroding the purchasing power of ordinary citizens. The government, desperate for a lifeline, has turned to the International Monetary Fund, IMF. The IMF, a lender of last resort, offers a glimmer of hope. A $6.5 billion bailout package hangs in the balance. This financial lifeline, however, comes with strings attached. Pakistan must implement tough economic reforms. These reforms aim to stabilize the economy and put it on a path to sustainable growth. The situation is dire, demanding immediate action. Failure to secure the IMF loan by June 30th could be catastrophic. A default on external debt looms large. The Pakistani rupee could further plummet, exacerbating inflation and deepening the economic woes of millions. The coming weeks are critical. Pakistan stands at a crossroads. Will it succumb to the weight of its economic challenges? Or will it seize this opportunity for reform and chart a course towards a more prosperous future? The world watches with bated breath. The June 30th deadline looms large over Pakistan. It represents more than just a date on the calendar. It is a critical inflection point, a moment of truth for the nation. The IMF program, agreed upon in 2019, is set to expire. Time is of the essence. The government must swiftly implement a series of prior actions. These actions, prerequisites for the IMF's tranche release, are non-negotiable. They represent concrete steps towards fiscal discipline and economic stability. Key among these actions is the passage of a budget aligned with IMF objectives. This budget must prioritize fiscal consolidation. It demands cuts in government spending and an increase in revenue collection. The aim is to rein in the burgeoning fiscal deficit. Furthermore, the government must address the energy sector. Power sector reforms are crucial to reduce circular debt. This debt, accumulated due to inefficiencies and subsidies, has crippled the energy sector and hampered economic growth. The IMF's demands, though necessary, are not without their critics. They represent a bitter pill for Pakistan to swallow, particularly for ordinary citizens already reeling from the pressures of inflation and unemployment. Austerity measures, a cornerstone of IMF programs, are often met with resistance. They involve cuts to government spending, potentially impacting social welfare programs and public sector jobs. These cuts, while intended to restore fiscal balance, can exacerbate the hardships faced by the most vulnerable segments of society. Furthermore, the IMF's emphasis on revenue generation often translates into increased taxation. Raising taxes, particularly during an economic downturn, can be a politically sensitive issue. It can stifle private investment and consumption, further slowing down economic activity. Critics argue that the IMF's one-size-fits-all approach fails to adequately consider Pakistan's unique economic and political context. They advocate for a more nuanced approach, one that balances the need for fiscal discipline with the imperative of protecting the livelihoods of ordinary Pakistanis. For the people of Pakistan, the IMF negotiations are not merely abstract economic discussions. They are acutely aware that the outcome will have tangible consequences for their daily lives. The burden of economic stabilization, as is often the case, falls heavily on their shoulders. Inflation, already rampant, is a constant source of anxiety. Prices of essential commodities such as food and fuel have skyrocketed, eroding the purchasing power of hard-earned wages. Families struggle to make ends meet, forced to make difficult choices between putting food on the table and paying for essential services. Unemployment, particularly among the youth, adds another layer of hardship. The lack of job opportunities breeds frustration and despair. It fuels social unrest and undermines faith in the government's ability to address the economic crisis. The IMF's austerity measures threaten to exacerbate these existing hardships. Cuts to social safety nets could push vulnerable populations further into poverty. Increased taxation could make it even more difficult for businesses to survive and for individuals to afford basic necessities. Adding to the complexity of the situation is Pakistan's fractious political landscape. Deep political divisions and a history of political instability have often hampered economic reforms in the past. The current situation is no different. The government's ability to implement the IMF's demands hinges on its ability to navigate this treacherous political terrain. Building consensus among various political factions is crucial. Failure to do so could derail the entire IMF program, with dire consequences for the nation. The opposition, sensing an opportunity to capitalize on the government's vulnerability, has been critical of the IMF program. They argue that the government has ceded too much ground to the IMF, accepting conditions that are detrimental to Pakistan's economic sovereignty. This political wrangling, while par for the course in Pakistan's democratic system, comes at a precarious time. It injects uncertainty into an already volatile situation. The government must prioritize national interest over partisan politics. Failure to do so could have long-lasting repercussions for Pakistan's economic and political stability. The stakes for Pakistan in these IMF negotiations are incredibly high. Failure to secure the loan and implement the required reforms could have a cascading effect on the economy, with far-reaching consequences. A sovereign default, an unthinkable yet increasingly plausible scenario, would be catastrophic. It would severely damage Pakistan's creditworthiness, making it nearly impossible to access international capital markets for the foreseeable future. The Pakistani rupee, already under immense pressure, could go into freefall. This would further fuel inflation, making imports more expensive and exacerbating the hardships faced by ordinary citizens. Businesses reliant on imports would struggle to operate, potentially leading to widespread layoffs and economic contraction. Foreign investment, already scarce, would dry up completely. Investors, wary of the heightened economic and political risk, would seek safer havens for their capital. This would further constrain economic growth and limit Pakistan's ability to create jobs and generate revenue. As the June 30th deadline approaches, Pakistan faces a stark choice, a fork in the road with potentially divergent paths for the nation's future. One path, fraught with risk and uncertainty, is the path of inaction. Failure to secure the IMF loan would plunge Pakistan deeper into economic crisis. It would signal to the world that Pakistan is unwilling or incapable of implementing the necessary reforms to stabilize its economy. The consequences of such inaction are dire. A sovereign default, runaway inflation, and capital flight are all distinct possibilities. Social unrest, fueled by economic hardship and a lack of faith in the government, could become widespread, further destabilizing the nation. The alternative path, though challenging, offers a glimmer of hope. By taking the difficult steps to implement the IMF's demands, Pakistan can avert immediate economic collapse. It can signal to the world that it is committed to putting its economic house in order. While the current situation appears bleak, it is not without hope. The IMF program, though stringent, provides a framework for Pakistan to address its long-standing economic challenges. It offers a chance to break free from the boom and bust cycles that have plagued the nation for decades. The reforms, if implemented effectively, have the potential to unleash Pakistan's vast economic potential. By addressing structural weaknesses in the economy, such as the energy crisis and the low tax-to-GDP ratio, Pakistan can create a more conducive environment for investment and growth. The focus on fiscal consolidation, though painful in the short term, is essential to create a more sustainable fiscal position. By reducing the budget deficit and public debt, Pakistan can free up resources for investment in critical sectors such as education, healthcare, and infrastructure. Moreover, the IMF program emphasizes improvements in governance and transparency. By tackling corruption and increasing accountability, Pakistan can build a more equitable and just society, one where economic opportunities are available to all citizens, regardless of their background. Pakistan's future hangs in the balance. The next few weeks will be crucial. The decisions made during this critical juncture will have far-reaching consequences for generations to come. The path ahead is fraught with challenges, but it is not insurmountable. Pakistan has overcome adversity in the past. Its resilience and determination have seen it through tough times before. What is needed now is unity of purpose. The government, the opposition, and the people must come together. They must prioritize the national interest over narrow partisan gains. They must recognize that they are all in this together. The time for blame games is over. The time for decisive action is now. Pakistan must seize this opportunity to break free from the shackles of its past. It must embrace the difficult reforms necessary to build a more prosperous and equitable future for all its citizens.